Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, is Tara.
Greetings, citizens.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together, we talk about a film we've seen, and it is actually it's December, but I mean we're treating that as 70s month. It's been a while since we've done this, but we've done it a couple of times now, and we are once again returning to the 70s well for 4 episodes featuring 70s movies. There might be a slight overlap at the end of the month with Matrix 4. That might actually come out before the 4th 70s movie, but that's just a technicality. Don't worry about that. Just roll with it. You're getting 4 70s movies.
It's just a Christmas present, that's all.
Yes. So, we're crossing off some that we've still not gotten to, of course, and we're starting off with Soylent Green. This is from 1973, starring Charlton Heston, directed by Richard Fleischer, who I'll remind myself of what else he directed, but I remember looking earlier in the week and going, oh shit, we've talked about a couple of these. Because he's done a few interesting things.
Did you do Omega Man? Because there's a lot of cast crossover.
Yeah, Amityville 3D, which we've not talked about, obviously, because that's a horror movie, but I'm familiar with it. And he did Fantastic Voyage. That was the one that I thought I was thinking about that we did. Interesting to have, because that's a 60s movie, obviously, so it's interesting to see kind of like that he was still working on a science fiction project the following day. He also did like Vikings, maybe one of his more famous movies from the 50s, which I've not seen, but I know people talk about it. So this is a dystopian science fiction film set in the future, although not that futuristic to us, because it's set in 2022. we are nigh on 2022, of course, as this comes out. We're less than a month away by the time you see this episode.
Maybe we should have waited to do this one until next year.
It's 70s month, like, you know.
It's alright.
And to be fair,
have to do it.
To be fair, we didn't know. Like, I literally sat down, I started the movie, and it came up saying 2022, and I went, oh shit.
Yeah.
that's right around the corner. So yeah, but it's in a future where, you know, the climate is shit, pollution has ruined so many things, lots of food is now super expensive and hard to come by, and most people eat rations of these things called Soylent. There's Soylent other colours, but obviously the one that we're mainly going to talk about in this is Soylent Green, and they look like plastic. They're these like plastic squares that you just sort of see.
Yeah.
Kind of like...
They're kind of like the original series cafeteria food in Star Trek. Where they're just like colorful cubes that come out.
I would argue they look more, because in the original series, the cards they put into the machine to then like make the food that we're going to eat, I would argue they look more like the cards that they put in the machine to tell them what they want to eat, rather than the actual food themselves.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in the beginning of the film, you see that they look more like pellets, kind of like lentils. And then you can see them in the factory later being made, and they look like sheets.
They look like plastic. They look like they all look edible. Like, I'm pretty sure none of the actors could pick one up and eat it. But we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into spoilers. Charlton Heston plays a detective in this world. The world does have some slightly different rules, of course, given the context, and I think a lot of what we're going to talk about in this review is probably the world building that it sets up, and the type of the class system, what's valuable, what's not valuable, how things work. Some of which obviously it's a very political science fiction film. It's got a lot to say about society, and there are some elements of it I think are a little dated in terms of like the messaging feels like it was forward thinking for the time, but there's certain elements that feel like they weren't considering certain things that we would jump to thinking about first now. You know, the thing I'm like, one of the examples I'm thinking of here is the idea that, so the older character Saul, who's like who lives with Charlton Heston, he's like his partner, he's what's referred to as a book. He does all the research and all the paperwork, whilst Charlton Heston's going around doing all the, you know, investigating and beating people up and whatever he does. And he constantly reminisces about his childhood because he's old enough to remember the world as it was, you know, and the world as it was basically meaning like present day 70s, I imagine, given the time period. And one of the things he talks about is like, oh, you used to be able to get like, you know, real food, and talks about all these different things. And one of the things he talks about is like, you know, like they talk a lot about the pollution like affecting the fact that they can't have meat and things like that. Whereas I feel like these days we would more look at like the idea of like the production of meat being one of the bigger contributors to the problems on the planet, rather than one of the things that would be taken away if the planet starts to go worse and worse. So it was not a big thing, but it's one of those little things where I'm like, that just feels like of the time, because the attitude and how it's thought about just hasn't quite gotten to where it is now. Yeah. So that stuck out to me. But but we'll talk about a lot of the class stuff and a lot of the like the items that are valuable and things like that. And a bit of a detective story, and of course this movie does have a famous twist. Although I hesitate to even call it a twist, really. I don't think the movie presents it. I mean, it is a mystery, and it is something that obviously is the motivating factor for the plot, but I don't know if I would call it a twist in the traditional sense, because I feel like the movie's intentionally building up to whatever the secret is the whole time. So it's not like pull the rug out from under you, and I feel like it hints at it gradually throughout the film. I don't think it's it's not like, oh my god, so it's, this was really this the whole time. It's not like that. So we'll get into all that juicy stuff. So yes, but I guess I mean, the actual plot of the movie is that a rich guy is murdered, and only rich people can afford a lot of the things that we take for granted in modern life. And it's the investigation of that murder that goes down this conspiracy path, and what's the secret he had, and all that stuff. But with all that out of the way, Tara, what are your thoughts on Soylent Green?
I really, really like this movie a lot. I had seen it when I was a kid. It was one that my father showed me. He was fairly excited to show me, especially because he caught me before the twist was spoiled for me. So, I did watch it without knowing what was going to happen next. However, that was a long time ago. So watching it now, knowing the twist, it's still really good. I think the mystery builds up really well. I think there's a lot of strong direction in this. There are scenes that maybe are a bit cheesy, but, I still kind of love them for what they are. They're like literal crowds of people that are being taken care of by like bulldozers, just like coming in and scooping piles of people, and because there's so many people. It's a lot of those, fear from the 70s that we've seen so much in these 70s months of overpopulation, of the environment going to crap in a dystopian future. However, I like that this future has a lot of rules, that people are just, playing along, doing what the government tells them to in order to survive. Because that is still like the number one thing, is survive. And people are willing to do anything to survive. So, and it hasn't really come to just murdering each other, although there is obviously murder in this film. It's like the other 70s movies we've watched. It is very much a just do what you're told and, get through life, which I don't know. I think it's kind of a unique little slice in this type of storytelling. And yeah, I enjoy, I love Heston. Like, he's so good. he's so good on screen, and like, you can see why he's been a leading man for so long. And, and he works really well with, is his name, like Edgar Robinson? The guy who plays Saul, it turns out it was his last film. Edward, yeah. Edward Robinson. So it turns out it was his last film also, and they had worked together before. I'm a big fan of the Ten Commandments film, and they were both in that together. So I'm pretty positive on this film. It's often like my go-to when I think of 70s sci-fi, and really like it.
Yeah, I did not see this as young. I saw this I was probably in my 20s, I think, by the time I saw this. So it was very different, because I knew what the reveal at the end was. I knew where it was going, which I don't think actually affects it that much ultimately. But then again, I never saw it without that, so I don't know for sure. It's worth mentioning. I think for me, this definitely is a 70s movie. Like, it's a 70s movie for better and for worse. Like, there's a lot of things in this that feel very of the era, and a lot of the things we've talked about in these previous 70s months, where we've went through a batch of these movies back to back, and we've noticed certain trends, we've noticed certain things and storytelling mechanics and filming styles, and there are touches in this that I think are really good in the direction, but then there's also just the general plot and like how it progresses does feel like a lot of the 70s movies that have this type of investigative plot feel very laid back, right? It has a very kind of like and not that I'm saying that I want it to be an action movie, far from it, right? Like this has a better investigation plot than, say, not a 70s movie, but Blade Runner's my go-to movie to like crap on a little bit when I'm comparing that. But this movie, it definitely chooses the things that it wants to focus on, and it's more interested in a lot of the details than it is necessarily having a plot that's moving at a nice pace and like is getting you enthralled in what the next step of the plot is. It's a lot more about let's stop and just explore each of the various sort of scenarios in this world so you can learn about the world. And because of that, it feels a lot more... maybe it is based on a book. I have no idea. Oh, it is. I just looked. Yeah. Right. So
the ending is different, though.
But it feels like it's based on a book anyway. Because it feels like much more like a book, just like lavishing in the details of the world building, rather than something that is like completely made as a movie. Which I guess is kind of a critique, but it like ultimately it boils down to what I've said about a lot of these movies is that there's a lot of stuff in here I like. I think it's a really interesting film that I think we're going to have some interesting discussion about once we get into the meat of the spoilers and all that. But I don't love it as much as movies that came later, and it's definitely not like one of my favorites of the 70s. Much like a lot of these other 70s movies, it feels like a prototype where this sort of subgenre of sci-fi I think would be done better later on in other dystopian films and whatever. So like for me it kind of falls into like I like a lot about it. I think it's an interesting movie, and I watched it twice for this review because we were meant to record this like half a week ago, and I just watched it again today because I don't want it to be foggy, so I'll throw it on again. Which admittedly it's easy to do when it's only like 95 minutes, so I mean thank you for that.
It's not like it's not painfully long or anything.
Yeah. So that is convenient. So thank you, movie makers, for that. Charlton Heston, he is an interesting fit for this because the character isn't like, he has like moments I think of empathy and moments where he's clearly a little bit better than a lot of the people in this world, but he's not like your traditional likable guy either. He's kind of, he's very stern.
He's so good at that though.
Yeah, it's kind of his thing. Yeah. In a lot of ways, which maybe is a critique in and of itself, that he is a little, he's a little typecast, I suppose.
Maybe, but he's so good at this role. Like he's powerful on screen, and he's like you could see him having authority in this world, and that he is sort of a rule enforcer, but he's also very corrupt, and like you do get those flashes of empathy, and he's never really like, he takes advantage of certain situations, and he talks about how he does that often, but he doesn't. I don't know. There's still something about him that's likable.
And what's funny, it's one of those movies where if you look at the IMDb rating, it's at 7.1, which is pretty reasonable. It kind of feels like it's had a bit of a legacy that's happened after the fact, but it's not necessarily one of the biggies that got all the accolades when it hit. It wasn't like seen as this big game-changing film. It's almost like things like Simpsons and other stuff, and I won't say what it is, but them referencing the ending is almost like giving it this life like beyond its generation in a weird way. Because I mean, even you said your father introduced you to it. Like if no one was there to introduce it to you, you might not have discovered it. It might.
I don't know. I watched a lot of movies from this time period, and especially I really liked Charlton Heston and science fiction films, so I probably would have. Okay,
fair enough. But it's one of those ones you don't hear it talked about as much as Alien, Clockwork Orange,
Sure.
the big 70s sci-fi movies, right? It doesn't seem to come up as often as those.
Yeah, but it's definitely above films like Boy and His Dog or Ultimate Warrior, stuff like that.
Yeah, I actually thought Boy and His Dog might actually have a very similar rating. Do you want me to check?
Maybe, yeah.
Let me check. I'm curious. I actually, one of the things you said, I'm glad you said, is the silliness of the scoop, the bulldozer scoop scenes with the skip with the with the tractors. I thought, like, I get the thematic point that scene's trying to make about how people are being treated, especially with things that are said later on, but it doesn't change the fact that it looks stupid. So sometimes the idea on the paper and then the idea actually on the screen are two different things.
Sure.
And that's
sure,
okay.
It looks silly, but I do like the idea that they have to use scoops, the large bulldozing scoops to move crowds, because otherwise people will get they'll just destroy everything in sight.
Yeah. Okay, it was a little bit lower. This is at 7.1. A Boy and His Dog's at 6.5. But I kind of think of them being like thought of in the same kind of like caliber. Like at least whenever I've heard these films talked about, they always seem to be kind of.
I would say, you know, A tier and B tier. So this would probably be, I don't know, like it is one that gets brought up a lot though, because it is still, you know, considered like a big deal with the ending and you know, it does, you mentioned it does get referenced in other shows like that 70s show and The Simpsons, and I'm sure other things. Living Color or something.
Joe, I think it is. I think the ideas are better than the movie is. The movie's not bad.
I think the movie's pretty good, but
I never said it was bad. I said it was not as good as the ideas are.
Okay.
You can disagree. You can disagree, but don't cop out with. I think it's pretty good. If you disagree, just say you disagree. Tell me I'm wrong. Go on, fight me.
Oh, I'm a pacifist.
Are you a woman or are you furniture? Come on, damn it, fight me.
How dare you? No, I do, like you mentioned the world building, that's going to be a thing that we talk about a lot, but I do enjoy all the details of the world building in this, and you know, what people are willing to do to survive, like what has become just normal, which is like the idea that women are just furniture.
Yeah, what I just said, if you haven't seen this movie because you're just watching the spoiler-free section, in this film, not all women, but a lot of women are referred to as furniture, and it basically means they are owned either by a man, or the more prominent case we seem to get in the movie is they're owned actually by like a landlord, and they come with the apartment. Like that's something that it's like an appliance that comes with the apartment as a woman. And yeah, so what we'll talk about, obviously, that's a big theme, and it's a big topic in the movie to dissect, because there's a lot to that. Yeah, for sure. I don't want to sound down on it. I think it's a really interesting movie with a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about. But I wouldn't say I love the movie as a whole as a movie as much as a lot of other things. Like I think it's in that very experimental, like thinking science fiction era, but it doesn't quite have the filmmaking chops of the stuff that's really like lasted and like kind of hit with people in the same way.
Okay, sure.
Because I mean, I can give some like objective critiques right now of the, like, I hate the shitty filter they've got whenever they're outside, and there's like a sort of green filter from the top of the screen.
It reminds me of ZPG, which is another 70s film.
Yeah, we did that one. I thought that looked really lame as a way to try and show it was polluted. I kind of like I get, like, it makes sense later in the film, but honestly, for a tone perspective, I think the opening with the montage of images with the classical music playing feels really weird and just like doesn't get me in the mood for the movie at all.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that was something that died out fairly early when it came to movies, because this isn't the only movie we've seen with that in it. I think Omega Man also had this kind of opening of images, and then all of a sudden it was
did Heston
an empty
demand
streets. And
did Heston demand it in his contract? I want a montage of images, goddammit.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, the reality is that's because the montage of images show, like, you know, society breaking down, and it's kind of telling the story of how the world got the way it is. Vaguely, it's not super specific, but it's kind of like broad strokes.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like this was kind of like, in a modern movie, the money and the effects are there to like do like a credit sequence where you're seeing it playing out over the credits, where you actually see clips, so you'll see like moments of all this stuff happening. This is like the cheap 70s way of doing it. It was, no, we got some stock
It's just
photos.
a slideshow.
Yeah.
And it's all like pictures of crowds because of like inaugural addresses or like war or something.
Yeah.
So it's not really selling that these are images of a bleak future, but just like current day events. Like one of them might have been Woodstock, showing people, look at these hordes of people.
Yes. Society is crumbling. Look at all these awful people. No, I like, because I know like I'm going to be accused here of just not liking some techniques because they're old, but like I love tons of old techniques that are older than this, and I love techniques from the 80s and 90s and whatever. But there's definitely a few
Stuff you saw when you were a kid, right?
No, but well, yeah, from the 80s and 90s, sure, but not from before the 70s, which I also just said that I like techniques from. Like, I feel like people who are of a certain age get really defensive when someone younger like critiques something of their time, and I'm like, I love tons of stuff from this era, but there's still stuff in this era that's not good, and I'm going to critique it.
Sure.
Deal with it. And this slideshow opening with classical music kind of sucks. I'm just kidding. Like, it does nothing.
You don't like the classical music?
I don't dislike classical music. I dislike it in the context of like opening this movie with it. There's no atmosphere.
I think the music works really well in this, actually. The using the classical music, just because they want to show images of things that maybe we take for granted now, and like just beautiful things like nature and music that has survived throughout centuries, that is just considered to be great. And I think that music came from before like an industrial time also, so it kind of feels more like it's from a natural world, even though it is made with instruments, and it's not like bird song or anything like that, but it is close to nature. It's definitely inspired by nature. I think that is actually a really good choice for the film. It doesn't need to open with the images and stuff. It could open like maybe differently than a slideshow or something, but because the crowds of people and the hordes of people that are clearly just stock footage, or that does age poorly. But
it feels like the start of a documentary rather than the start of an actual movie.
Yeah, I mean that stuff. Fine if you don't like it. It's whatever. But
I'm not saying
it's definitely of its time.
I get why classical music is used later in the film. I'm just saying that from a mood perspective, it doesn't set me up for like, because this movie, like when it actually starts properly after the opening titles, like it's kind of dim and gritty, and it feels kind of depressing because of the world we're in. Maybe you could argue there's some irony or some like contrast with the music we've just had, but like I'm like, it's the start of the movie, like settle me in, like get me in the mood for what I'm about to like sit through, and I don't think that's what it does.
Okay.
It's there's almost a feeling when especially because I watched it twice this week now. Like when I watched it the second time, I actually went, oh yeah, I forgot it started with this music. Like I'd forgotten, like, and I'd only watched it like 3 days ago, and then it got to the end of it, went, okay, finally the movie can start properly. It just feels so out of tone with everything that comes right after it that it's just so. But yeah, it's just there's little things like that I think do hold it back a little bit. So, and some of the action stuff that happens later on is, like this is definitely from a time before there was like famed like action and fighting choreographers and stunt coordinators who were doing like stuff that would become like what we think of as movie action scenes. It feels it feels like a crossover from like that Western era where it's like a little bit goofy and people like clutching their chest and like, blood looks a bit fake and stuff like that. Just little things like that. It's not a big deal, but like, action scenes still feel like they're kind of still not quite transitioned from the olden days of Hollywood yet, and they're still in that 50s Western kind of like level of quality versus, again, like, I don't know what, I guess 70s is probably when it starts to really transition, but it transitions in certain movies. It transitions, over time. So
Yeah, I think I know the kind of thing you're referring to. There's one stunt in particular that's like, that guy didn't die. But I do like the choice of what you call an action scene is really not that much of an action scene because there's no music that plays at all. It's just industrial noise that's accompanying it the whole time. So even the chase scene doesn't really feel like a chase. There's still tension there, but it's not like... I think it's a really cool choice to not have any music playing.
I'm not debating the choice of music. You're actually thinking of the wrong scene, though.
Well, okay.
I'm talking about a shootout that's happening, not which, and I'm fine with not having music. Not having music in scenes like that like adds to the tension, can make it eerie and kind of creepy. Like that is not a problem with this. If anything, that is one of the things that it does that feels a bit more forward thinking, because I feel like, you know, in most older like shootout scenes in movies, like you would have some that almost sounded like Predator. See, if I go back and watch like a western from the 50s and I hear like I'll be like, Alan Silvestri, what have you done? You've ripped off some old movie.
310 a Yuma.
I've seen that. Definitely wasn't in that. Oh, it's a good movie though. 330 Yuma's a really good movie.
Great film, yeah.
The original. Definitely good. Yeah, okay. So, yes. So, I mean, you're clearly a bit more positive. I think this film means more to you, is maybe what it boils down to.
Maybe. I do genuinely think it's a great film.
I feel the same pacing and the same kind of detached quality that I do to a lot of the other movies that we've done in these 70s months. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah, you also don't really like detective mystery movies. It's something that's been brought up before.
I don't see why I shouldn't like them. But I will admit the detective-y part of this is the least interesting part of the whole thing. You know, the actual investigation of just interviewing a couple of people, like, there's not really much interesting like stuff in the actual investigation itself. It's all the world building around it that's far more interesting. Which is, I guess, kind of why I compared it a little bit to Blade Runner, because Blade Runner even more so has that problem where the investigation is so goddamn dull.
I would say, yeah, Blade Runner probably gets some inspiration from this, even in its lead character. Although Heston I like a lot more. I
definitely prefer Harrison Ford to Charlton Heston by and large. I mean,
really? In that movie?
Not necessarily in that movie. I just mean in general.
Oh, you mean like overall?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Heston was one of the greats. I mean, the whole NRA thing is obviously awful, but like otherwise, as far, just acting goes, I think he was one of the greats.
Well, I think this comes back to, again, like, I mean, you said you like 10 Commandments and probably Ben-Hur.
Oh, I love it, yeah.
I've not seen 10 Commandments, but I thought Ben-Hur was the most boring, painful, like 3.5 to 4 hours of my life.
Yeah, I also love The Agony and the Ecstasy, where he plays Michelangelo. That's a really fantastic film too.
I can't say I've seen it. I've basically only seen him in his science fiction movies, I think. Barring
some of the classic ones.
Touch of Evil. Although Touch of Evil, while a fantastic film with a great villain, does have one big problem from he's playing a Mexican, all right? That's
okay.
Right? But like that movie, like I wouldn't say that movie's great because of Heston. I mean, not only is what's your face? Oh goddamn. His name's just escaped me. Who made Citizen Kane? Orson Welles, that's his name. Right? Orson Welles, right? Not only is it Orson Welles' direction, which is phenomenal in that film, Orson Welles also plays the villain. And it's the villain in that movie that makes it so memorable. So I'm not necessarily going to like give Heston the credit for that one. So
you should watch more Heston films. I'll send you a list.
You can send me a list, but anything that sounds like biblical or is over like 3 hours long, I'm not doing.
Well, there'll be a very short list.
Well, okay, I think we've established, and I definitely cut some, like, we went on a tangent there, but what we've established is that Tara really likes Charlton Heston, grew up watching Heston films, has an attachment. I have no such attachment, right? That's what we've established, right? We agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you edit all of that out?
No, I have no idea, like, where I'm going to, like, start the edit from, so I'm just making sure that I'm explaining why there's, like, a weird jump, if it does feel like a weird jump. It may not. Maybe it'll be smooth. But I'm not convinced it will be, so I'm putting in a little, explanation just before we go into spoilers, so people understand.
Okay.
Where our minds are at in the conversation. Excellent. Let's go to spoilers for Soylent Green. So, the plot, rich guy dies. He gets beaten because he knows something, and the Soylent company, can't trust him anymore, and Heston's going to investigate it. But we're not really going to talk about the plot that much. I don't think. I think we're going to more talk about all of the world building that comes out of the investigation and the scenes that sort of take place. There's a few hints, like when Heston like first wakes up and it's like they have to like ride a little bike that powers their electricity. They reference the fact that like the old man's like, oh, where's the food? Like I miss having real food and whatever. But it's when he goes to the crime scene, right? Because we get teases, we see the rich man a little bit, and we see his furniture, quote unquote. He's bought her a video game, a very high tech video game that looks like it belongs in 2022. It's like an early arcade machine.
Yeah, it's pretty sleek in its container, though.
Yes, which I'm not critiquing. Obviously, they can't fake like what video games are going to look like in 2022.
Of course, yeah.
But it's just funny how far they've come.
It was neat that they even had one.
Yeah, it's early enough that it's actually kind of impressive. They have a machine at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is right at the dawn of that era, I guess. So the fact that she calls it a toy as well felt really weird to me. I mean, I guess it technically is, but the way she's like, "Thanks for the toy."
Yeah.
Like, that's weird. They call it a toy.
We don't know what she is. She just looks like his girlfriend at this point, or even wife, maybe.
Yeah, he's got himself a young trophy wife. He seems like a happy man. It's not until after he's died and Heston comes around that we kind of start to get the context of what furniture is, and we hear the conversation. But the big thing, like this scene is basically like Heston, because the guy's dead, he's like, well, I can just help myself to as much as I can carry, and like there's so many things here that are,
he just loots the place, that
are normal to us. Like this is all stuff that we expect to find. One of the, I critiqued a little bit of the direction here or there before, but one of the little moments of direction that I think is really good actually is in this scene. There's a moment where he's talking to the bodyguard first, right? So there's a bodyguard character, and he's getting some details, and they're walking around, and he gets like the booze, and he's like, oh, bourbon or whatever, and he's like, ew, very swish. And there's a moment where he looks in the bathroom and he turns on the tap, right, and water starts coming out, and he reacts a little bit to it, but it's in a wide shot, and he doesn't really focus on it too much, but he quickly like says, hey, go and like write a statement or whatever, right? In fact, even the fact that
he said, can you write? And he goes, yeah. And he's like, okay, go out in the hall and write yourself a statement. I'm not working.
But even the fact that he can write, like, sorry, the fact that he asked, can you write, that is like a bit of world building, right? Because like, we consider that to be like a thing we expect everyone to do. But it's when he like closes the door after he leaves, where then the camera goes into a close up where it just like, even as he's closing the door, even it cuts to a shot of the sink, and it's like, this is a big deal. The fact that there's running water here is a big deal. And then of course he takes a minute to like actually like splash some water on his face, and he sort of like looks at the soap, and he's like, oh my god, soap. Yeah. And he's like really enjoying it, and it's like really getting into all the just the love of the moment, and like the nourishment that he's not used to.
The luxury of it.
Yeah. And then of course he steals a bunch of food because they have some real food in the house. To get some books for his book, as they call them.
For his bookie. Yeah.
And leaves with like a pillowcase full of stuff. He looks like he's just ransacked the place. And
yeah, it tells us a lot about the police of this world too, because they still have a lot of power, which makes sense if you still have a government, and you still have it, and you have overpopulation, you need to have some form of control. So it would make sense that some sort of military and police force, they're probably the same thing at this point, has survived through this, even though they are very corrupt. And even here, like, yeah, he's just, looting the place of a dead guy, and everyone's just letting him do it, because to fight him would be like immediate jail.
But there's also kind of like a bounty system going on here, because like even the guys who come and pick up the body, sanitation, like is, hey, I get my
they
cut.
pay them off.
Yeah, I get my cut of this, right? And he's like, yeah. And when
and the police chief.
And the police chief, yeah, like those. But I don't think it's like a seedy thing though. I don't think it's like a pay him off in like a dodgy way. Like when he goes to like turn it into the police chief, it feels like, no, this is just the system. Like, like I get X amount, you get X amount. Like the sanitation getting paid off a little bit, like maybe seems like it's slightly unusual, but not in like a dodgy way. Like it seems like, oh, okay, well, yeah, okay, it gets 10 for the cut. But it's all like a bounty system where they're all getting like, a portion of the proceedings. So it feels like really commercialized as far as police work goes.
Right.
Which is almost something they could have explored more, because like the motivations, the idea that this guy, that Heston's still determined to like figure this out, that he still cares about the case, is maybe an interesting thing they could have explored a bit more.
Well, yeah, I like that. Like, I like that he's still a good detective and he's still doing his job really well. Like, he immediately goes to his police chief and just says, I think it's the bodyguard. I think he's the one who arranged it. And, he's right.
Yeah.
He's just, like, he gets it. He's still really good at his job. Yeah, which is probably why he still has it.
More specifically, they didn't arrange it, but he's the one who had like all the, like he left the door open. He made sure, like, he was like the inside.
The security systems weren't working just for a short period of time.
He's the inside man, because obviously the people who arranged it were the Soylent company. It was the the 1%ers basically. Who was like,
I really actually love the scene where the guy breaks in. Also, it's sort of the opening that we glossed over, but like the guy, he gets paid off. He sneaks in through the window. And has like he said it was a meat hook, but it looked like a golf club or something to attack the guy with. And like he knows he's there, why the guy's there, to kill him, and says like, I deserve to die, or at least. And the burglar says like, so I shouldn't call him that, the assassin, I guess. So it's right then, like it's a good thing that I'm here. And the guy says, well, it's not good, but it's necessary, because the truth that he knows, or maybe what he even suggested, maybe he's like the brains of it all. Just can't live with the guilt.
I think it's a mix though. I don't think it's just like there's definitely guilt and there's definitely him feeling deserving, but I think it's like him saying it's necessary, I think, is equal guilt, but also equal part that he knows he's going to cave and start like feeling the need to tell people. So he understands why the others, like he knows that this is coming, because he's expecting the others to fear that he's going to start talking, to fear that he's going to out of some like need of redemption, or some need of trying to atone for his sins, try and make it right. So like he understands why they're killing him, and that's why he's expecting it.
And he says it's for God also, and so we know he's a religious man, and he wants to recently try to atone for that, at least.
He's recently become religious, probably because he's...
Well, I mean, yeah. But I mean, we already know what the secret is, but like, maybe this is a necessary evil for this world, because everything else is gone. So...
Yeah, I've got some hot takes when we talk about the ending and then the secret. I got some hot takes.
Okay.
So, but yeah, all this stuff, it all builds kind of, and this leads to like, he takes it home to Saul, and Saul like smells the bourbon, and he sees the real food, and the beef especially and this is actually quite a good scene, because it makes him cry, because he realizes how like happy he is to see it, and then that makes him sad because of how much the world has changed. And he says a line at one point, maybe I should have went home years ago, and we don't know what that means yet. It sounds like literally what it means to us at this moment in the film. It's not until later we realize that that's a phrase for going and like letting yourself be killed, like in a peaceful way, to like just end it and like turn yourself in. Probably something they started at some point because, well, we'll give people a chance to opt out peacefully because we're overpopulating. So if they have maybe they'll go a bit early if they're like, it's time to go.
Right. And maybe it's taken from like, when we take old people to the home or to a home.
Ah, yeah, I guess, yeah.
Maybe it's just evolved from that.
We're going to put grandma in the home, the old folks' home.
Right, yeah.
But no, like that's a really interesting scene because it gets so emotional, and it leads to I'm skipping ahead over some other stuff. We'll go back to that, but I want to talk about the dinner scene because
I love that scene. Yeah,
Saul prepares dinner, and it is one of the better scenes in the movie because it again, like if there's one if there's one thing I can critique about the world building in this is that it's almost making the same point for too long, because there's a lot of this movie which is look at all the things they don't have, and it does that a lot. But it's mostly really good, which is why I'm not really critiquing it. But it is ultimately making the same point as we've already had. But, like Saul's like, no, you're not going to use that plastic cutlery. You're going to use the classic metal which I feel like the metal would actually be more reusable and, like, I don't know. It makes more sense for them to have metal cutlery to me in this world, but whatever.
Maybe it just gets sold so often or stolen so much.
I mean, there's a lot of cheap metal cutlery. It's not like they're all silver. Like,
I don't know. Metals, yeah.
Yeah.
You can melt any metal down, though.
I suppose, yeah, for billets or something. I don't know. Whatever you're using it for.
Yeah, it's already a pointy thing, so I don't know.
So
yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't notice, but
but he's made them a stew, and he's like, and clearly Hester has never had this before. Right, and I did like the small touch that the first thing they have is like a piece of the lettuce, yeah, and like Saul like sort of watches for his reaction before he has his. So, and the way Heston kind of puts the lettuce in his mouth and just sort of goes, it's all about you, Philistine, and then he's like, lettuce.
Well, I think that's a really cool thing to start with because he's trying this stuff for the first time, but Saul is remembering it.
Yeah.
So like he has all these like. You don't appreciate lettuce until it's gone.
Yeah, but I like it. I like it on the fundamental level, though, that it's like, like even if you've never had it before, lettuce is still just lettuce. Like it's not going to rock anyone's world when you have it for the first time. I mean, it's also a bit weird. I mean, I get that he's just trying everything for the first time, but typically we don't just have lettuce on its own. You'll have lettuce in a thing with something.
Sure,
you'll have it mixed
adds
with
the crunch.
Yes, yeah. It's just you don't just have a plate of lettuce, right? You're not rabbits, okay? But
well, I mean, a lot of people have salads for a meal, but
yeah, but a salad is more than just lettuce.
Sure.
Don't say it like that. It is. No one just eats a plate of salad, or a plate of lettuce. They have a salad, but a salad is made up of multiple things.
Yeah, you just have to have one extra thing and it's a salad.
I'm having lettuce with some salt. Salad.
Yep.
That sounds awful.
Salted lettuce? Yum. Eat it all the time.
No. But that seems like fascinating to watch, like just like Heston react to having a stew for the first time, and he's just kind of like taken aback by it, and then like the way he like copies Saul when he rubs the apple against his chest.
It's sweet, right? Yeah.
It's kind of sweet. It's kind of adorable. Although I'm going to ask a question here. I'm going to admit something about myself.
Have you never had an apple before?
I had like 2 apples today. I have apples all the time. How dare you? What's the rubbing against? Like I see him doing movies. What's this rubbing against your shirt thing? I don't get it.
It's because there's like a wax around apples that is used to preserve it when it goes to transport and in grocery stores and stuff like that. So the wax you can remove either with like a physical rub, or you can wash it.
But he only rubs one part of it, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it plays out to like, and this is where kind of the light classical music in the background is that it's like they're treating it like a decadent meal. This is where it works because it's like, no, it's just a shitty little table with a cloth over it. Like, this looks like this is the most ramshackle little dinner that anyone's ever like had together. But it feels decadent in this world. It feels like they've made the best of their shitty little apartment, which most people sleep not even have. Most people are sleeping in the stairs, or they're sleeping in alleyways, or they're doing whatever. So the scene does a great job of kind of like selling all of this, and like just like they have this magical night together.
Yeah, I like the way he makes him like smell everything too before he tastes it.
Oh yeah, cause smelling less, yeah. So, like smells good.
I don't know about that, but just everything is savored.
Yes. A stew you can smell. I mean, it has a smell. I'm not saying it doesn't smell, but it's not something you have a whiff of before you bite into it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you do.
Love it.
Oh dear. So the movie, like, he goes and like investigates the bodyguard, investigates his apartment, which he does have a woman there, a furniture, if you will, and bizarre. So this is the thing that caught me off guard. So the movie earlier on, Heston doesn't so much accuse her, but kind of like tries to prod. Cheryl's the furniture, the woman who was with the victim, and he kind of prods at her and says, were you cheating on him? So it kind of implies that if you're, with someone as a piece of furniture, you're not supposed to like do it with other people. You're supposed to just be theirs, which makes some amount of sense. But when
he was investigating also who might have a motive to kill him. Yeah,
but when he goes to this woman here, right, and almost she's really just trying to distract him because she's noticed that there's a spoon with some really expensive jam on it that she doesn't want him to notice. She kind of offers like, maybe I should offer you something, and he sort of says a line like, oh, if I had time I'd ask for it, and I'm like, okay. So that murked it up a little bit, but then later on Heston goes to Cheryl again, and don't get me wrong, I get that for her, like, she's now technically between tenants, right? She's not really tied to anyone, but obviously this is a big part of the world building, is that he just kind of walks in and says, all right, on the bed, and there's no like, there's not even like a yes. It's just like, of course I'm going to do what you're asking. Of course we're going to have sex. Of course that's going to happen. There's no like ifs, ands, buts, like, or acknowledgements.
There's some buts.
Well, you know what I mean. There's some literal buts. And there's other lines to sort of hint like, oh, she's lucky that like this guy was nice to her, that he didn't beat her up. She's lucky that he wasn't some asshole. To seem to care about her. And part of the film is that her and Heston kind of grow attached to each other. It kind of feels like she is very emotionally dependent on someone, and she kind of clings to him very quickly after the death of her. She doesn't really.
It seems like this is something she was trained for, also from a young age, just to be pleasing to men, and she is very young in this. I mean, she's like 20 something, mid-20s probably, but there's a line in the beginning where when her former lover is being taken away, that she says, I remember when my grandmother died and there was a ceremony. And that's like the only thing she remembers from like the old world, is that was still there when she was a very young girl. And then we see him taken away in a literal like garbage truck. Like, that's what this world has come to now. That's another like interesting world building thing. Like, there's just so many people that there's no room for hearse anymore.
Or just ceremony or
ceremony. Everything is waste. Everything gets taken apart and disposed of.
Yeah. So there's some world building with that. And this is actually one of the scenes that kind of like, because obviously this also kind of feels a little bit unlikable, right? Obviously this is the world that they're living in, and this is just expected. But this would be easy to sort of see this as unlikable. It follows it up though immediately with the landlord of the building, who comes in and starts like, because she's got like other furniture, for lack of it feels weird to say that, but that's what they are. It's basically the ladies from the other
tenants. Yeah.
So they get their 1 day off a month. So generous, by the way. 1 day a month. So generous. And they're spending it together, but the landlord's not happy about that.
It's a vacant room. Why not?
And he comes in and he starts slapping some of them and hitting them and yelling. And then Heston comes out the bedroom. Yeah, and he's like, immediately the guy kind of like, oh, I didn't know you were here, Detective Thorne. and he gets very tense. And Heston, like, sort of like scares the shit out of him and sort of throws his weight a little bit, and sends him with his tail between his legs. But so it's like, okay, so you're giving me an example here of him actually being more, at least more sympathetic than him. Like, if nothing, like, it's one of those weird things where, like, and if this character was in a regular movie with his attitude, he would probably come off as like the villain. But in this world, he's coming off as one of the more sympathetic characters, partly because of how he's treating Cheryl. Aside from just the assumption that you will have sex with me because I deemed it so. But otherwise, he's nice enough to her, and then the way he treats Saul as well. These are the relationships that he has that kind of tell you, like, he's got some lines, he's got some morals, he's got some. Yeah.
Actually,
empathy.
there's a very similar scene in Once Upon a Time in the West where it happens from the villain, and of course we hate him for it, even though like she's going along with things and stuff. It seems like pretty much the same scene, but done through the perspective of the hero versus the villain.
Yeah.
I guess the hero is probably the wrong word, but like protagonist versus antagonist.
Yeah. So it's obviously one of these things where like women's rights in this future have just deteriorated to nothing.
Yeah.
They are not only property, but like property that comes with an apartment. Like you get a stove, you get an oven, you get a woman. Like that's the level of which it is devolved to.
At least for a certain part, like a certain portion of women, like women who qualify, who meet the qualifications for this, and they're considered lucky to have this position.
And that's the really demoralizing part of it, is that like because they get access to finer things in life because they're with rich men, because they're the only ones that can afford places that come with women. Like it's like, oh, you're lucky, you get soap, you get like some real food, you get like hot water, like you should be happy that you're a sex slave.
Right.
Like that's the attitude.
Yeah, because I mean, we do see women like outside in the crowds, like trying to get food and stuff like that. So I want to assume that they're all property. They're probably just trying to survive, just like everyone else. I'm sure there are women who have jobs in this world still. We just don't see. They probably don't get very high up or very high paying jobs.
We do see.
We do see one female. Yeah, actually,
as
an
book,
older one.
Yeah. But I wonder if that's because she's just been doing this since before things changed, and they're just like, well, you're still qualified, so you can
I think he calls her like Your Honor, like she used to be a judge or something.
Yeah. So, lots of cool world building with these kind of details. I actually really like as well that afterwards, when everyone goes home, like Heston's leaving, and she's like, no, I don't want to be alone. Stay. Like, you can have this. We can have sex again. I'll make you breakfast in the morning. And he's still saying no. And then she's like, you can have a hot shower. And he's like, you have hot water. And she's like, I'll rub you down after.
Yeah.
Like, oh, go on then, hot water.
He's like, I'll take strawberries in the morning. We don't have strawberries. Then an egg will do.
Yeah, because they're 150 dia char, and it's actually, I mean, it's actually jam. It's not just strawberries, but
it's like preserve or something. Yeah. Doesn't it make you want it though? Like, it looks good. The way she eats it and stuff, I'm like, yeah, strawberry jam is good.
Well, honestly, not so much, because he makes Saul taste it after the spoon's been in his pocket for like a half a day, and I thought that's disgusting.
Well,
like,
you can't waste it.
how much fluff from your pocket is on that jam? That is disgusting.
Some strawberry jam and lint.
oh. Nasty. So, but again, like, just this idea of like the temptation of like it's the idea that he's tempted more by having hot water than he is more sex. Like that's like, as cynical as that sounds, that's a pretty big.
He already just had sex.
He did. Yeah, but there's always seconds. There's always second sex.
Well, also, like, he can get sex probably anywhere because he can just raid someone's house for, police reasons and have furniture. But, the hot water is probably more harder to find.
That was kind of the point I was getting at earlier, like, because the bodyguards, Missy's kind of offers, and I was wondering, well, like, had this guy still been alive and he came around, would he still be able to demand sex like this, or would it be like not allowed because I don't know. Like, was the bodyguard's missus just like sort of like doing it because she's not supposed to, but she was offering because she thought it might work as a way of like just like putting him off the scent?
Maybe, but also like the place that she lives in is not the same kind of place that the other woman's at. You know, she lives in, I wouldn't say the slums of this world, but like what we would consider to be kind of a trash place. Like they have at least 4 walls, and because he's a bodyguard, but
Heston keeps complimenting on all the space they've got. This is a spacious apartment.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe they recently moved into it. There is a guard at the front area with a shotgun.
Yeah, this is probably more like middle class by like this world standards.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So, because one of the things with is like they feel like they're getting closer, and then later on, after he has like a near miss, we'll talk about all that in a minute. He goes back to Cheryl and like embraces her, and she like seems happy to like be needed by him, and he like is sort of growing attached to her. But then when things are going down and he's being hunted at the end of the film, like he calls her and says, no, stay with whoever the new guy is. Like, just, don't get involved with me. Like, you have to stay away from this. And she looks kind of devastated. And we do feel kind of sad because like the new guy might not be abusive or anything, but he does come off as a complete sleazeball, because we get the one scene
totally.
where he comes in, he's like, oh, I waited for so long for an apartment here.
He said, I was on the wait list for 2 years for someone to die.
And he looks at her because it's almost like, yeah, he could say I don't want her, and she'll get like punted elsewhere, possibly onto the street. She may not even get like another posting. It might just be a case of like,
you're too old now.
Yeah. But he's like, I have friends, because he describes what he likes for breakfast first, but he's like, I have friends over 3 or 4 nights a week. That's a lot a week, by the way. Just 3 or 4. Like, and sometimes it's business and we like to be left alone, but sometimes it's fun, and then we like a girl who's fun. Are you fun? And she has to like force a smile, and it's like, you just feel all disgusted.
Yeah. Yeah, I like I think that's a really well written scene also, just because you get exactly who he is, even like when he walks in and like, I deserve this. I'm a strong man in this world, and I should have had a place like this a long time ago, and they made me wait. Like that was pretty clear. And also it opens up, like, when you think back on all of her scenes with Heston, like, is she really getting close to him, or does she know, like, because she's getting older and there's a new tenant who might not want her, does she need a backup plan just for survival? Yeah,
is this maybe just the best option she might have going forward? Because at one point when she's talking about like, and this is maybe an interesting thing to go back into the furniture are supposed to feel lucky for their positions, because at one point when he compares this place to his, he's like, oh, I've got a place, but it's nothing like this. And she kind of just goes dreamy-eyed and goes, this is my home, I don't want to leave. And it's almost like, if push comes to shove, what would she rather pick? Like him or the house? Like, or more specifically, him or this lifestyle? And she might actually pick the cynical one. She might go for the lifestyle, which is, again, like a very unlikable trait. Like, she inherently is more sympathetic to begin with, because, well, she seems innocent enough, and she's in this horrible position where she has no rights, and she's at the mercy of these horrible men around her. But ultimately, she might still make these selfish decisions that feel a bit less hard to like get on board with. Not that you can necessarily blame her. Like, this world does seem pretty shitty, and maybe accepting this is the best option that she has. But
still, like, how long does she have?
Yeah, like, once she's in her mid-30s,
and she's furniture, like, if she gets hurt, or if like him or his friends get a little too excited, they could like really hurt her also.
Yeah, would they even get into trouble? Would that be like a crime if
if she's furniture, if they kill her, like, probably not.
Yeah,
people, we already saw like the landlord be super violent with the girls, like seemingly no regard for how strong he is against them.
Yeah, and unless there just happens to be someone decent there who has a problem with it, it doesn't seem to be something that has any repercussions. Yeah, you definitely get that feeling. So, Yeah, so I wanted to just stick with her plot line because I thought it'd just be neater to tie it all together.
Yeah, it definitely ends very dark. And, he does tell her to stay there, but it could also be because, you get real food there.
Yeah.
And at this point, he knows.
Yeah, so the investigation, he hears from her that the guy went to see a priest, so he goes to the church, he talks to the priest, and the priest does seem kind of shaken, like he's learned something that he doesn't want to talk about.
Yeah, he's super distant.
And it's throughout this part of the film where we see that not only is he being tailed by someone, right, that the guy who hired the hitman in the first place is at the police station. He wants them to just sort of, write the case off as complete. Like, some guy broke in, no big deal. It was just a robbery gone wrong. Sweep it under the rug. But when they find out about the priest, it's like, oh, he went and talked to a priest. We'll have to make sure. So, we get a scene where the bodyguard guy goes and assassinates the priest in the confessional booth. And that's what leads to Heston going to... well, actually, no. I think, did they try and assassinate Heston first before he goes to beat up the bodyguard? I think they might. Because that's
Heston knows that he's being tailed.
He does, yeah. But I'm saying... Yeah. I think he goes to beat up the bodyguard after he's... almost been killed, because a guy tries to kill us. It's during the big riot sequence with the scoops that's silly, but there's an assassin who tries to kill him, and when there's kind of like he gets shot in the leg and he's able to shoot the assassin, and then we get like, in theory this is a fun death, but of course there's only so much they can show of it, so it's a little bit silly. Which is
the crush.
Yeah, the crushing of the big scoop and the tractor like comes down and crushes them.
I think, yeah, in theory, you're right. It's cool. Of course, we don't get to see anything, so it's not that cool. But also, like, the guy stands there for a long time. He definitely had time to move out of the way.
And plus, it's not the Wilhelm scream, but it might as well have been the Wilhelm scream. Like, it's just this sort of goofy scream that you hear as the thing comes down. It feels a bit silly. Yeah.
Well, this scene does happen after the police chief tells Heston to get off the case.
Yes. Yeah, because he's put on riot duty, yeah. But of course, because someone tries to assassinate him, it's just like, well, I'm sure than ever that I'm onto something. So he goes and beats up the bodyguard.
Right.
At his place, so.
And his furniture.
Does he beat up the furniture?
Mm-hmm. Well, he throws her around. He slaps her and throws her around, because that's what agitates the bodyguard enough to attack him, which gives him the right to really go after him.
So he uses corrupt...
He's correct.
Tactics, yes. But worth pointing out, he's not this squeaky clean guy. Like, he is doing things and considers it okay to pull a lot of shady tactics to do what he's doing. And while this is going on, Saul has been reading up on the big books that he got from the rich guy, and he's went to like consult with other books at the exchange, they call it. And we cut away from him, we come back, and like they've discovered something that's shaking him to his core. He's like, I can't believe this. I see what it's saying, and I see what it's kind of implying, but I just can't believe it. And he leaves Heston a note saying that he's going home, and we see him walk, and we have this kind of goofy effect shot, and I get that they wanted it to look like there's a long like street leading to this building, but you can kind of see that they've got kind of like a matte painting of the building, or the street's kind of fake.
I love a good matte painting though.
Yeah, so because there's a real building, because when he gets close to it, you go into like a shot near the entrance, and there's a real building there, but they've put this building at the end of a big long street that it's not really on, so you get this weird effect shot of him walking up to it, and then again later when Heston is running up to it dramatically, like it's the same thing.
I do like when he gets close to the entrance, and then this young woman just opens up the door, and her hair's flowing like from the air conditioning because it's hot there. They always talk about how hot it is. And Saul's just like, it feels nice in there. It is nice. Come on in. Like, it is very much like he's walking into heaven or something.
It goes back to the scene earlier on when Cheryl convinces Heston to stay with the hot shower. One of the things he gets really excited about is, okay, but we're going to turn up the air conditioning. So it's almost like he gets this taste of like, between the meal with Saul and then this spending the night at this place, like he gets this slice of the high life, right, of the exquisite life, and then he's brought back down to reality throughout the rest of the movie. So there's this kind of like this trying to attain, like there is definitely like this like harsh critique of capitalism in this film, and like everyone trying to claw their way to the top, and like screw you, I've got mine kind of mentality that's there, and the people in power try to keep that in place and all that. So yeah, Heston comes running in and catches while this process is going on, and gets to watch most of it. And it's they put Saul in the room. They asked him his favorite color, which is orange. So it's like bathed in orange light. He's in this like comfortable
so 70s.
bed.
That's such a 70s color to pick.
And they're basically just showing him footage of like fields and nature and rivers and wildlife as classical music plays. And this is why I get why the intro is the way it is, to kind of like link up with this. But still, I think it's perfectly fine in this scene. In this scene, it completely works because there's emotion in this scene because Saul's watching it and getting emotional as he's dying, and like Heston's like talking to him over the intercom and like try to like talk to him. And it's right before he dies where Saul kind of like snaps out of the happiness and says, "Listen to me, like you've got to tell them, like, you know, Soylent is," and he kind of like he can't quite get it out though. He doesn't quite say it.
Well, he doesn't say it to where we can hear it, but Heston like puts in headphones and is talking to him, and he does know the answer at that point. We just don't know it yet, unless we've figured it out.
Yeah. So he actually chooses to like follow. Like, he follows the guys who came out and
I do want to. I don't want to leave the scene yet because
Sure.
I did read in the trivia also that the actor, this was his last movie, but also this was his last scene that he ever shot before he passed on. He passed on 10 days later after he shot this scene.
Damn.
Yeah, and he and Heston had been friends for a long time because they've worked together many times, and the reason he died was because he had cancer. I think it was lung cancer. But so he and Heston already knew that his time was limited. So him doing this death scene and saying goodbye to his friend, like those are real tears coming out of Charlton Heston. And it is an emotional scene, especially if you know the background. Like I do get emotional during this because I think it is very real when you watch it.
Yeah,
anyway, that's all I want to say.
No, that's a good thing to bring up. I think the emotion does feel good in the scene, because when they say "I love each other," that was a weird way of phrasing it. You know what I mean? Like when they say that, it does kind of feel real. But it's actually almost enlightening hearing the truth, like what you just explained to me there, because I don't know if the movie, like it almost feels like it's like more emotional than the rest of the movie's earned. But I guess it makes sense because you're telling me the actors were actually like had these real feelings, and that's why it comes across like so genuine as it does. Like it almost feels like the movie, by its nature, is more cynical than this, and isn't meant to like hit these notes, but it kind of does in that scene, which is for the better. Like it actually makes for a better scene. But that's interesting to hear that's why, because there was actually just some truth to the fact that he was dying and they were really friends. So that's interesting. But Heston follows like the body. He follows where the guys take it in the truck, and he follows it out to the plant. And we get 5 minutes of him like following around, wandering around this place. Is just like you said earlier, it's just the industrial machinery. It's just the him looking around, and he sees the bodies get into a pool, like a big vat, and then he sees like other things, and then eventually he sees the conveyor belt with just the Soylent Green squares going across, and that's when people see him, and there's a bit of a chase, and he hides in the back of another truck leaving, and makes the phone calls and all the rest of it, and he tries to. There's a bit of a chase. This is kind of where I was saying the action scenes, for lack of a better term, when he kind of opens fire on the guys that are chasing him, and it is very just sort of like pew 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 and like duck and run, and it was the same.
This is the scene that I was talking about also, when because there's no music at all during this scene. Like the music doesn't come in until the very end credits.
Oh no,
it's just sound effects.
I know. I was never critiquing the lack of music though, but you specifically pointed out the industrial sounds, which I assume you meant the factory scene. Yeah,
there's those scenes, because I mean the chase does start there, and then it goes through the factory, and then it goes into the streets, and it's just nothing but clip clop clip clop clip clop, that you hear from there also.
Yeah, it's almost the idea that this process is just going to keep happening no matter what. This is just like the thing. This is just what's going on in this world now. But to be fair to the like there's not a lot of music in the movie. Like there's very little music in this movie that's not being played in the scene, because even when Saul's dying, it's played into the scene. Like it's not just
it's
the
being
movie.
Played over speakers, while he's dying.
So like it's actually just in like tone for the rest of the film, for the silence, this lack of music.
Right, but I think it prevents the film from becoming like an action movie at the end, because there is a shootout and there's a chase, and I think if there's music there, it would feel more like that. And this instead keeps it very tense. Like it still feels like a murder mystery sci-fi film.
No, I get what you're saying, but it could be more tense. That's my problem with it, is that the actual gunshots and the ducking and like diving feel still too old school to me. So I agree that the lack of music and the sneaking around in the dark, especially when they get into the church and like the bodyguards hunting him around all these people, and he ends up shooting some innocent people as he's going for them. But a lot of the actual shooting and the, when like Heston like jumps over the couch and like it's like somehow the bodyguard's still missing him even though he's like 3 foot in front of him, and like there's a lot of the old silly Western logic kind of like just peeking into like the logistics of a lot of this, and sure. I could feel that, because I agree, going around in the dark and like him running in the street away from these bad guys and then trying to dodge this guy around all these like poor people in the church, like all of that like should make for this really tense sequence. I think the direction just isn't quite there to really capitalize completely on the tension. Like I can definitely imagine like sort of similar scenarios, like, or when I say similar, I just mean like similar, like, cat and mouse style scenarios from other movies, from other types of directors, from later eras that I think would handle it better. That, like if I think of like De Palma like directing this last 10 minutes, not the whole movie, just this last 10 minutes, like I can see like just how much better it would be because it would be De Palma.
Yeah, 70s De Palma also.
70s De Palma, yeah. Yeah, so that's not even a case of being later, right? I mean, if I'm picking 80s De Palma is probably more my favourite De Palma, but like, yeah, he was good in the 70s too. No arguments. Yeah,
Phantom of Paradise.
So, like, but that's kind of what I was getting at. So, but yeah, it's a bit of a gunshot shootout, and bodyguard gets killed. Conveniently, there's a giant butcher knife lying on the floor next to where Heston lands at one point. It did make me chuckle a little bit.
Well, not a butcher knife, but like a regular kitchen knife that somebody had stored like next to their bed.
Aye, but it's a big sharp. It's like a big Michael Myers one.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine just somebody had that as a weapon. I mean, look at where they're living. They're living in crowds of people. Maybe most people have some sort of protection on them.
Oh, okay. All
and
right.
It's just whatever they can get,
As far as headcanon goes, it's actually pretty good. I'm not convinced that was the intention, but like, fair.
Okay.
But
maybe
yeah, so
he's the cook for the church.
But he kills the bodyguard. The police chief shows up, and like Heston's like bleeding out, and he's like getting taken away in a stretcher. But this is when he finally says it. You got to tell them, Soylent Green is people. It's made out of people. And as he's been carried away, it freeze frames on his bloody hand, and then the classical music starts playing again. So yeah, Soylent Green is people. That's what the whole movie's been building up to. And when you think about the whole idea of the movie of people fighting over to get what's theirs, and the idea that other people are literally have become the food source of everyone else, maybe not the rich, but most people, then
right.
So it almost makes it literal. It's like this idea of like dog eat dog world. Well, now dog is literally eating dog, right?
Yeah,
that's essentially what's happening.
Yeah, like what happens if we still have some sort of system of control in the future, but there's no food. Like what? Like what's left? What can we do? And even Heston says like, sure, right now they're just taking our dead because we're running out of food. We're almost out of, like, all the farms are dying, all the fish are gone, all the plankton's gone. But what happens when we only have cannibalism left? Are we going to just start breeding people for food?
Yeah, he says we're herded like cattle, I think is the line it says, which is a legit concern, right? And that part I'm on board with. Like, that is a concern. Although the overpopulation seems to suggest that it may never be a problem. Like, there's so many people dying constantly that it may never actually be an issue.
Maybe, but they do have shortages of Soylent Green, they say in the beginning. Like, it's new and they're running out of it. So, I mean, not enough people are dying, I guess.
And it is interesting that it's the popular, because they've got a few other colours that are made from other things. It's interesting in the one that's made from people, which might be the only one that's made from technically meat. Is interesting that that's the one that everyone likes. Yeah,
I guess Soylent is some sort of combination of like soybeans and lentils. Soylent.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not that much of a hot take, but I was sort of thinking during this scene, I'm like, if the world is in this position, is this really that bad? Like, to make use of the
to
people?
eat the dead?
Yeah, I mean, to make use of them. I mean, they're just going to waste otherwise.
To resort to cannibalism? I think yes. It's pretty bad. Also, because like when you watch the movie knowing what happens, every time you see somebody die, you're like, they're food now. That person's food now.
In the grand scheme of things, right, this idea that, like we're all just made up of the same matter, and then, it becomes something else when we die, we go back into, eventually that may become a pig.
Maybe we're all food anyway.
Yeah. Like, I guess what I'm saying is that if you're just taking it as, like, in the same way that you, like if you're in space, you might, like, recycle your piss, right? Is it really that much worse to say we're going to recycle the meat of humans and, like, process it to a point where it's unrecognizable, but that's what food ultimately is made out of at some point down the line?
It's pretty awful.
I'm not saying I want it. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that I feel it. The sad ending to this is that I think most people are just going to go, well, if we need to, we need to. I think they're just going to accept it.
That's true. I mean, and maybe there'll be more people who like want to die because they don't, like, much like Saul's reaction of, and I'd say the priest and the person who dies in the beginning of the film, I think their reaction is, I can't believe that we've gotten ourselves in this situation where this is the only way to survive now. I don't want to live in this world anymore.
Because I think what you're saying there is that it's less of a, this is disgusting, we're eating people, and it's more of like a philosophical, like, this is what we've come to as people. No, it's not like just the, ew, we're eating people, oh, that's disgusting. Like, it's not just that. It's more, no, this is what the world is now. And
this is what it's going to take to survive. Yeah. And is it even worth it?
Yeah. So, which is the more interesting. I mean, I'm joking a little bit, like, but logistically, like, like
if it just looks like green cubes.
Yeah, like, well, whatever.
You can buy Soylent if you want. It's available. There's some San Francisco company that makes Soylent.
Look,
it's not made of people though.
Look, in the real world, right? There's nothing wrong with farming, as far as I know, and in the real world, we're at the point now where we're almost at lab grown meat. At which point, like,
Sure. So some things are, I guess, dating a little bit.
So it's whatever.
As far as soil goes, there is concern about, like, some soils. There's definitely, they brought up, the oceans are dying. That is still something that we are dealing with because people refuse to stop fishing. I think the plankton thing is also a current day issue, if I remember from my environmental science courses.
But like, I mean, okay, you can bring in, like, what's really going on in the world right now, but I just mean, like, there's a lot of context that's not in the movie that I'm ignoring to say, is it really that bad if we're recycling people as food, right? Look at it this way, right? If someone died, because how people donate their organs, right, and they have a donor card, well, what if someone said, no, I want to be used to feed a family? Like, I want to be used as food. Like, that's not a bad thing. Like, if someone dies knowing that,
consensual, then that would be all right.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's not that philosophically that bad.
If somebody consents to being eaten after they're dead, yes, that would be acceptable.
Which Saul kind of doesn't, because he knows what's going to happen and he chooses to go and die. So I wouldn't say it's really consent, but it's kind of in the ballpark.
It is and it isn't, right? Because he really has he doesn't want to live in this world where he has to eat humans.
He doesn't want to live in this world anymore, you say. Why is that? Is it because everyone's betrayed him? Okay.
He's not time himself. Yeah, so he doesn't want to live in this world anymore. He wants to go in a way that is peaceful and as close to happiness as he can get. And he doesn't have to eat anything, right? So, like, there's no opportunity for him to, like, he might get hungry soon, and what's he going to do? May as well go after this nice last meal that he had with his best friend, and go peacefully. What happens to his body after that isn't really his choice, but it's the best choice he has.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I'm sure he didn't really want to die. but he doesn't want to eat people.
Yeah. I don't really care what happens to my body after I'm dead. I'm dead. I don't give a shit.
I mean, I have the donor on my driver's license, so
Sure.
yeah, I'll be donated to science. But I will say, like, as somebody who has worked with cadavers before at the college that I worked at, I don't want to be a science experiment for children. That's what I'm trying to say.
Not treated with respect. I would
Yes,
guess.
that's a thing that I wish I can add to my donor card. Please give my organs, my perfectly good heart to somebody in need, but don't dissect me in a classroom full of idiots. Please, thank you.
I think that's understandable and fair.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy that part of my job at all.
Yeah. I am. Yeah. I mean, it's like, people. A lot of people have a preference of being, like, cremated or buried or whatever, and I'm like, I'm dead. I don't care. Do what you want.
Well, sure. We don't have the spiritual part of us either.
Do you know what? I want something funny.
I don't want to be eaten.
I wouldn't say I do either, but, like, if that's what happens, that's what, like, put me in a cannon and fire me into the ocean. I don't care.
I mean, I like the idea of my corpse not being desecrated in any way or eaten. Like, I guess I would prefer to be buried.
I think my corpse being desecrated would bother the people who are still alive that cared about me much more than it will ever bother me.
Well,
once
obviously
I'm
it
dead.
wouldn't bother me, but, like, I still don't want that. Like, it's the reason that we bury our dead, and we've been doing it for, since before we've had civilizations even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just a good place to put them, I suppose. Like, the way to smell
so
them.
so they don't get eaten by, vultures and stuff.
Also, no one wants to look at a dead body.
It's true.
It's
Have
kind
more closure that way.
it's disgusting. So yeah, out of mind, out of sight. Ultimately.
That's a human being. All right. They had a life.
Yes, that's metaphorical human being that we've not even given a name in this in this scenario. It's not even a specific person. We're just saying in general.
Could have been your ancestor.
And they're long dead, so they don't care.
Sure.
Oh dear. But yeah, so I mean, like, obviously it's the big conclusion to the film. Like, I'm making a lot of jokes because it's fun to talk about. It's fun to kind of debate the silliness and the harshness. But ultimately, the actual more serious take that the film, I think, is going for is the idea that, like, people, taking things from each other, trying to, like, get theirs, screwing anyone else. I mean, I use the phrase dog eat dog because honestly, I think it's the best example I can think of to, like, just sort of sum it up. Right? It's literally become dog eat dog. And that's sad because we should care about each other, and that's a big thing that's missing in this movie, is that most people don't seem to care about each other. There's not a lot of sympathy and empathy between characters. There's little glimpses of it between Heston and Saul, and Heston and Shirley to an extent. Obviously, that's what we talked about that, but there's not a ton of it, and that's like, so it's kind of like a, like, be grateful for what we have and the people around you, and actually cherish it. Is, I think, ultimately kind of the message of it.
And for the people, who come after you, like, the next generations.
Oh, I thought you meant people who chase you, like.
No.
like because he gets tailed in the film a few times. I was like, wait, what?
I don't care about them.
That makes more sense. Yes, your
The future generations.
Yes.
Take care of the earth.
The earth.
The earth.
The earth.
I'm not saying F.
The earth. The earth. Take care of the earth. No.
Take care of Mother Earth, because, you need her.
Well, someone's been watching Mother.
I have not seen that film. No.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, well.
But I already assumed that's what it was about. Yes.
You're in for a treat when you do watch it then.
Yes, I'm very familiar with the film, but I haven't seen it.
Speaking of course, of Aronofsky's Mother, not the Korean film Mother, which is actually a better film, if I'm honest. But that's neither here nor there.
No, it is not. So
yes. So yeah. But there you go. That's Soylent Green. That's pretty much it. We can sort of sum up and give ratings now, if you would care to.
Yes, I would. I think I'll go first.
You always go first.
I obviously I really like this movie a lot. I saw it very young, and it was one of those pinnacle science fiction films from the 70s for me. It's probably one of the ones I think of first. And I do think that the message in the film, although some of it's kind of dated, especially when they talk about like population size of the Earth, I think we've actually surpassed that, and we do actually have enough food to feed everybody. We just don't distribute it correctly. And so some of it, like the numbers were a bit off, but in any case, I do think the message of, maybe not the overpopulation message, but just the message of what kind of world do you want to live in? What kind of a future do you want for us? And is pretty strong in this film. And I know you say you don't, you think it's a good blueprint for another better film later on or something, but I do think this film is really strong, and it's got very strong performances, and I really like it. So I'm going to go with a 9. And I'm sure your rating will be much lower. That's okay.
That is rather high, I have to say. I don't think it is a science fiction classic. I don't think it belongs in the conversation with a list of films that I'm not going to name, because we're planning on doing a top 25 sci-fi, and I don't want to just tell you all the things I'm going to rate above this, so I'm going to keep that to my chest. But I think there's a reason why it's a little bit more distant, I think, to people than other films, even films from the same era. And that's not to say that there's not a lot of great things in it, because there is, and there's a lot of good ideas in it, and we've had some fun talking about them and talking about how they show these details. But there are some good moments of direction, but I do think that a stronger directorial hand would have went a long way. And perhaps, maybe part of it is just, the more bog standard sort of like noir detective-y side of it kind of drags it down a little bit for me. I'm not sure, but I do think it's a good movie though. I think it's an interesting film, and I do think science fiction fans should see it. So for me, it is a comfortable 7 out of 10.
Okay.
And Tara's not looking too mad, so I think I've passed the test of because I feel like if I had said like a 6, I may have gotten scalding eyes.
I guess I would have been a little upset about that. Just
well, Tara is going to pose for the thumbnail, so
wish I had something I could eat.
Tara says that often before we start recording.
I was eating before we recorded.
All right, 3, 2, 1, pause. That was the classic. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to put my thumbs up. So excellent.
That's my best Siskel and Ebert impression, if I chose what they rated it.
All right. Well, you said that Siskel and Ebert came off as a bit pompous. There's a good risk of me being pompous next time, because next film we're doing for 70s month is the original Solaris from Andrei Tarkovsky. So I have seen this once before, but it's been quite a bit of time. So I am very curious to see how I feel about it, especially since I have since watched and loved Stalker. So I'm excited to dive into this again. And sort of come at it with a bit more of an experienced eye. And you've not seen this, so I'm excited to see what you think of it.
I've not seen it, but I own it. I've owned it for like years.
Perfect.
And I've just not popped it into the DVD player. Blu-ray player.
This is a great excuse to finally unsheath that Criterion sword and slash it into a disc tray.
Smooth.
I have been accused of that many a time. Thank you very much. I know.
Oh my God.
You can, of course, be a Patreon producer, so let me take this time to thank our Patreon producers for the month. Thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Sharp, Board Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, and David Brown. They are our producers for the month, so thank you very much to our Christmas producers. That's right, you get a special title this month. But you can, of course, support us for much less than that. Can't you, Tara?
That's right, Peter. If you enjoy our reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MilesFestTV. And if you donate as low as $1 per month, you will get access to bonus episodes of The Ace, including our 70s bonus episode, which will be coming out in December. So you can get 5 70s films instead of 4, like the rest of you freeloaders out there.
Freeloaders. I would have went with chumps. I'd have said chumps. That's my go-to word from...
Yeah. Anyway, check that out. And if you donate $5 per month, you'll get access to these reviews one day early. And you get to vote on what we watch once a month.
Yes, one of the 4 films you'll be getting this month was a vote winner. So that'll be coming up later in the month. Probably after Solaris, I think. So look forwards to that. Of course, you can support us for free by simply liking, subscribing, dinging the bell for notifications, commenting what you think of the movie we talked about, or just any of the random discussion-y things we had come up in the comments. So please do all those things. If you listen to the audio version, you can, of course, rate us 5 stars. See, out of 5, like civilized people. I mean, I prefer a 10 as a rating scale, but 5 stars I accept. It's a nice civilized rating system.
Don't rate 5 out of 10 for us.
I don't realize 5 out of 10. No. 5 stars out of 5. And a nice review on iTunes or wherever you get a podcast from is greatly appreciated and helps out the show a ton. And that about does it. I've told them what's coming next time. You've done the pose. I think it's time to bid them adieu.
It.
Yeah, that's the show. Soylent Green in the can.
Ew, like spam. Spam might be people. I've heard that human tastes like pork.
What a subject to end us.
Oh, do you think the steak that they had was really a beef steak?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, Saul seems to know his taste. His taste buds seem well trained, so he seemed to know what it was.
Yeah, but like looking back, like, are there any cows left?
Well, we see like one little like tent that's got like a garden in the middle of the city for rich people, so maybe there's like a little cattle farm somewhere just for the rich people to get their cows beef.
Maybe they ate human.
They've been eating a human anyway. they admit to
I know,
eating
but like
Soylent Green.
a slab of human versus the super processed Soylent human.
Actually, I know it's weird to bring up another final point here right before like we've done the outro, but do you not think it's weird that we don't actually see anyone eating Soylent Green the entire movie?
We just see people I think that we do see him eat Soylent Green on a cracker in the beginning.
No, that's margarine. They call it margarine. It's just slightly out of date.
I thought he said something about how like it's not bad. You should have this, and he goes tasteless shrill or whatever.
Yeah, he's talking about margarine because he just said it went bad, but they're going to have it anyway. He's like, it's not bad.
Okay.
That wasn't Soylent Green. I think we see the police chief like eating one of the Soylents, but I don't think it's green. He's eating like a I don't know what color. It wasn't green though, because I was looking for green. I was really keeping my eye out for the green.
If this were remade today, it would have more people eating green goo on crackers.
Well, it's not goo though, is it? Is it meant to melt? Is that what you're telling me?
I imagine it's like it comes out like a brick, so you probably can do things to it, like melt it or
I
turn it into a paste.
I assumed it was more like a protein bar. You just
like
sort of bite
cheese.
into it. You just sort of snap it off.
Maybe.
I
Anyway,
could be wrong.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you once again for watching and listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer. Add salsa.